Session 3 and 4 taught by Dr. Reams and Black in 1977. This is tape 15 side B.
Are you ready? Okay, if you're ready, why we are. You're also going to find that these people have a little bit more problem with mucus congestions. And these mucus congestions can be just about anywhere. Can include the sinuses, the throat, bronchial areas, lungs, and can even include the bowel. Even though mucus is not a usual factor with the highly alkaline bowel. You can even find these people having a lot of mucus congestions throughout their body. These are the people, you know, that they keep talking about as being catarrhal in nature. This used to be the word years ago that they used. You know, they have a catarrhal nature. You know, and they would say that these people could not drink milks or eat breads because they were catarrhal in nature. Well, the word may have been off, but the statement was correct. Now, these people generally tend to have alkaline reactions. Now, this starts to give you a clue, too, doesn't it? These people tend to have alkaline reactions. So you'll see a lot of these people not only having an alkaline bowel, but you'll find them having alkaline sweat, alkaline urine. If you find out what they're doing relative to their shifts, the biggest percentage of them tend to be that way until you get a bunch of delta cells in that system, then they'll start to swing acid. The greater the acidity, the greater the number of delta cells, and the more the delta cells, the more that it promotes the acidity. So they tend to show alkaline reactions. And this basically gives you a brief idea of where they're at. Now, what can you do for these people as far as some of the things that will help to offset this parasympathetic dominance, things that we have available to us, things that we have in our stockpile, either from IAL or from the local drugstore or down at the health food shop? Okay, we can keep them away from the no-nos to start with, but not necessarily all of them. Let's talk about the ones that we want to keep them away from. We want to keep them away from white flour. My pencil keeps getting its string in the way. We want to keep them away from the white flours in any of its form, okay? That includes Hostess Twinkies, okay? Pastries, spending their breakfast at Mr. Donut, and all of this stuff. Now, you want to keep them away from the sugars because the parasympathetic dominant person has a little bit of problem with white sugar. Surprisingly enough, though, these people don't seem to have much trouble with honey, unless some other condition has established itself in the body over the top of this. What are you doing? So you want to try to keep these people away from the white sugars, but they seem to do real well on maple sugar. They seem to do real well on honey. If you're not having adrenal problems, they can even do very well on molasses and things of this nature. But the white sugars tend to trip them up. These people seem to do fairly well if it's just a problem of parasympathetic dominance on corn products. Now, Doc, I think in the back of his mind knows some of this because at the retreat and everything like that, he is so famous for utilizing cornbread down there, morning, noon, and night. Okay? Yeah, they seem to do well with corn products rather than white flour products. They seem to do a little bit better with them. Of course, there can be corn allergies, but somehow or other they seem to, if they must have a bread of some type, they seem to do better with a cornbread than they do with, say, white bread or a muffin or a biscuit or something of that nature, a Hostess Twinkie, whatever. So you keep them primarily away from these two areas and all of their ramifications. Now that includes cereals and everything else that this flour can be in and the sugar can be in. So basically speaking, it means most of the stuff in the supermarket. All right? But one of the things is people say, well, gee, what can I have in place of the breads? And it seems that they do pretty well on corn products, unless they have a hypersensitivity to corn. That throws them just the same as anything else, son. She said, what about whole wheat bread? And I said, that throws them just like anything else. Doesn't make any difference. It's dead. Okay? Huh? It's dead. You've ground it. You've mixed it with stuff, poured yeast in it that forms alcohol, and baked it in an oven. It's dead. Cornbread is dead too, but even dead and whole wheat bread, certain minerals and stuff can be picked up from it. But it seems to be the gluten in the flour that these people get set off on, and gluten isn't in the cornmeal. So that seems to get around it. Couldn't hear you back there, my good man. I have found a couple of people that do very, very well on rye, because rye tends to leave an acid ash, and they really do swell on it. But in our area, we cannot get any type of rye bread that's worth a tinker's you-know-what unless it's homemade. So I've just kind of stayed away from it. Yes, my good man? God, I don't know. I haven't done any work on it. It would depend on the balance of the grains. Look up and see which are acid ash residues and how much of it would be any wheat or wheat byproducts in it. A lot of things that says that it has no white flour in it has gluten in it to act as a binder to keep it from crumbling. So you have to kind of read the label close.
There's a company in Grand Rapids, Michigan makes, I can't think of the name of the company.
Can you send me the address and we'll pass it on? What's the name of it? Is that, how can you spell it for me?
No, that's not it.
S-C-H-E-R-O-T? B-R-O-T. That's not it, but is that a good one? Okay, well, this might be it. But I think then the thing to do would be to look for the health food stores and see what they've got. Now, what can we put on these people as far as dietary additions? In most instances, you're going to have to figure on some HCl, betaine hydrochloric acid. Now, this is especially true if they're above 35. You're going to have to up their vitamin C, and when you up this vitamin C, you're going to be surprised sometimes how high you have to up it. We're given that old adage that 500 milligrams a day is enough to maintain health. I'm not even sure that's enough to maintain health in a slightly agitated 1-ounce mouse. All right? But anyway, why you thought I was going to say some other kind of mouse, didn't you? anyway, why you may find that you're up anywhere from 3 to 5 grams a day, and even that's nothing but a stabilizing dose. Doesn't seem to be really gaining on them. There's a test, by the way, too, that you can determine how many milligrams of vitamin C are circulating in the blood, and they found something out. And that is, as you continue to take successively larger doses of vitamin C, your body retains successively larger amounts of it, so that you can build your vitamin C tolerance up. Okay? So that's something that has just come out in the last 2 or 3 years that I've become aware of it. But they have found that you can, by increasing the dosages over a period of time, build up your storage facilities, for lack of a better word, for vitamin C, and keep your vitamin C circulating level at a higher rate. Yeah, so was everyone else, until the point where that people who did offshoots from Linus Pauling's work, when, of course, he started the whole ball rolling. He wasn't the initiator, but he was the first one to publicize it. But they have now begun to find that the body does, in fact, store certain amounts of vitamin C, and as you make it more and more available to the body, that these reserves will increase. Seems to be storing it in the cells themselves, not in any one organ of the body. Never heard that statement, hon, but I will try. Let me mark it down, and I'll see what I can find out on. You say vitamin C and gallstones? Okay, let's stop right there, and we'll take off on the food line for the parasympathetic dominance after we have our break. You know, I had a bunch of other things on my mind, but this particular fellow said, gee, I can't figure out for the life of me if I'm recording the I numbers accurate to where they actually are. And he said to me, he said, "How can you do it?" And it never dawned on me that, that some of the little trick that I put together to do it might be of interest to some of the rest of you. And all I did was take a piece of cardboard and I folded it over on both ends like that. Okay, I just took a piece of cardboard and I folded it over on both ends like that. Okay, and then I stick it in their eyes. No. No. Now let me show you what the cardboard looks like on the front. Now on the, I cut it out. And then on another piece of cardboard that is longer, I drew my whole eyeball, and I have my eye chart, and I just slide my eyeball in there. And as I look at this particular person's eyes, I draw out wherever the vessels are, and then I merely slide my eye over or back, whatever I have to find out where it should show up with the eye either turned inward or outward. So I just use a slip, and just slip it back and forth to make sure that I'm using the proper number. This goes in there. Huh? Okay, have you ever seen a slide rule? You know how one seam slides in the other one? Did I tell you that I took this piece of cardboard here and I folded it over? Now there's a place to put a slide in there. Okay, and then I cut this out and I drew my eye chart out on my other piece of paper, my eye chart on the other piece of paper, and I stick it through there on my other piece of cardboard. And I can move it back and forth inside the opening and know exactly. So if I bring this eye over here, for instance, then I can see all of my numbers relative to that hole and relative to where I marked the vessels, and I can figure out exactly how I want to number them. Okay, that's also how I've been telling which numbers I want to convert to other numbers, because that particular eye chart, I changed some of the numbers over on it when everyone started pitching out these eye charts that said that 3 meant your tonsils were falling out, and 4 meant that you had a ingrown hair in the roof of your mouth, and that 5 meant that the temporal bone had disintegrated, and 6 meant that. And anyway, when they did that, I just changed the eye chart. And then later, if they came back and said they got it from me, I said, I beg to differ you.
We have the real McCoy.
You have the one that will work just fine if you just put it into a folder like this, or now you're going to be, on many of your eye numbers, now that you more fully understand the patterns, you're going to be more fully aware of where to draw them in and what significance they have, see? But I'll tell you what, though, I did hear this morning that's kind of interesting to me, and that is that I had heard that from Bob Chaplick that a number of people in the class had complained because they'd finally gotten the eye numbers, that they felt that all that they were interested, that they were not interested in the scleral analysis. All they wanted to know was just what eye numbers that Doc personally used, and that all the rest of it was totally, as far as they were concerned, worthless, and various other things. So anyway, why, someday in the future I'll show you the eye numbers that are valid that Doc uses. You can write them on your thumbnail and carry them with you. Okay, that gripes me no end to bust my butt, and then find out, that after the people have been asking for that that it doesn't satisfy them when they've gotten more research pulled into one particular area than anyone in the United States has been able to do in the last 20 years on the subject, and it's still not good enough. So when Bob told me that, I was very, very upset, believe me. He claims there was enough of them that he was getting enough reports of it that it was significant enough that he told me. So that kind of bothers me. I hope that is a small percentage, but you can understand sometimes why that I get, to the point where, that I sometimes just feel like, what's the sense of, pushing, because of the fact, that it seems to a degree anymore in some instances that no matter what I attempt to do, it's not enough. Well, I hope that's the truth. But anyway, neither here nor there. Yes.
Reference to that, but also to what was said earlier about running of 2 heads and everything else. Would there be some way that we all collectively could say, well, and not just positive to you and the last never hear it, or whoever's supposed to hear it? Is there a way that we could have in paper an actual evaluation sheet? You can sit down and go through it, so the lab can go through it, and spot here. The lab will know it's a
Mhm.
strong point. Just 2 or 3 people grabbing you.
Well, they don't talk to me, they talk to Bob, but yeah, I think that might not be a bad idea. You know, because you don't realize the heat that I have taken, you know, in attempting, you know, to finally get him to say, okay, I'll let you, okay? But let's go ahead on this. We had gotten the vitamin C, I believe. We had gotten down to it. Now, one of the things is that you have to have the B vitamins, and in your notes there is a list of the respiratory Bs. In your class notes from Class 1, there's a list of the respiratory Bs. And it is real important, it's real important that you up on the respiratory Bs when you come in on this. And you have to bring these people up on vitamin E, and you can usually do that fairly easily because they usually tend to have either normal or hypo blood pressure. So you can usually start up on the E a lot more rapidly with these people than you can with someone who is hypertensive. So this is super because you can get a lot of E in there. Now, surprisingly enough, you have to build up their level of unsaturated fatty acids from their diet because of the fact that they need these unsaturated fatty acids to help generate heat and generate energy within their system. They need these real well. And of course, they're easy to find in the diet, providing they have not been hydrogenated. So now that's important to watch for. Now, chlorophyll is another thing that these people need. Now, we're going to say chlorophyll, or we can do it with 2 L's. This chlorophyll is, of course, by far best if you get it from a green drink. And anyway, I have experimented around on green drink, and one of the things now that I throw in green drink that I think is very valid that you should consider, and that is throw a handful of sprouts in each of your green drinks. Alfalfa, whatever you want to. But anyway, I have found that 2 things, that sprouts increase its effectiveness and lettuce decreases its effectiveness. So I use no lettuce whatsoever in a green drink. Now, I may use Chinese cabbage, which is in effect a lettuce, or I may use leaf lettuce and stuff of this nature, but I don't use any head lettuce. But chlorophyll is one of the things to concern yourself with. Now, another thing is calcium lactate. I told you that sometimes you could find people who were acid that should be taking Cal-2 according to the numbers, but yet they seem to respond better under calcium lactate. That's the parasympathetic dominant person. He seems to respond better under calcium lactate, whether he's acid or alkaline. Usually the acidity is just due to the fact that his tissues are breaking down. He's aging too rapidly. These people seem to do real well in early life, but when they get up to around 40, 50, they tend to break down much more rapidly than the sympathetic dominant person does. They tend to do real well in their early lives, have very few health problems, and then start developing increasingly more health problems in later years. And anyway, when these health problems begin to occur and delta cells begin to develop, you may see them going toward the acid side, but nevertheless, calcium lactate seems to be the factor. Now, another thing that's necessary on these people is to make sure that they're getting not only calcium lactate, but make sure they are getting enough iodine in their diet. And I would highly recommend that you stay with Dulce across the board. Lynn can give you the address of where you can get it. And I have tried kelp tablets from 12 different sources. By the way, algavim is not a source of iodine. Okay, it has a little bit in there, but it's not a significant source of iodine. It's a significant source of trace minerals, but iodine is not as high as you may need. And kelp tablets are very erratic as far as their consistency, and very frequently have mercury in them now. So you have to be very careful as to where you get your kelp tablets. So make sure you get them from a very well-established company, and not go down somewhere and buy a 98-cent bottle of 10,000 of them. Pull out the plug, did we? Oh, okay. Non-colloidal or colloidal? It appears that, for the best of my knowledge, that it would be colloidal because of the fact that you can tell the degree of sewage in ocean water by the degree of mercury in the kelp. No, it's colloidal. It bothers them. If it's non-colloidal, it doesn't bother, isn't it? Yeah, isn't that correct? Colloidal doesn't bother if it is compounded. Okay. Well, I'll have to check up on that because I'm really not sure. I'll take your word on it. I just don't have any. I haven't checked it. But you say that if it is colloidal, yeah, because it's compounded. Okay, and if it's inorganic, then it becomes deadly. Okay, I'll have them over at the lab over at there in Iowa. I'll have them check some. I've got a whole bunch of kelp tablets that I have sorted, you know, that I've gotten given to me and stuff of that nature, and I'll check that particular point. In fact, I'll make a note of it because I had not thought of that. I did know that the tests running on them were showing high degrees of mercury. Okay, well, I'll be happy to check that. Well, colloids can be anywhere from very, very small to reasonably large. Okay, your protein colloids are reasonably large. Your colloids like talcum powder, for instance, are reasonably small. And what he's talking about in being colloidal is bound in a matrix. Okay, that's what he's referring to. And he says that if it is colloidal and bound in a matrix, that it is in effect neutralized and will go through the body without any absorption or any problem. But that if it is inorganic or colloidal not bound, that it can be a problem. And so he says the thing that we're going to have to determine on the test is whether or not it's colloidal and bound. Okay? Yeah, I'll get them working out over there because they've got all kinds of graduate students that are just dying for things to do. Okay, now another thing is that these people need potassium-rich foods. But if you're giving them a lot of vegetable juices and stuff, they're going to be getting a lot of potassium-rich foods. And they need, you know, they say that your food should be approximately 70% alkaline and 30% acid as far as a natural balance. All people like, I think Dr. Ariola and all of these people have made mention, even clear back, I think Dr. Walker even says something about that. Does he, Lynn? Where's Lynn hiding at? Does Dr. Walker make that remark too? 80-20? Okay, 80-20. So anyway, it's in that area. But anyway, when you get the parasympathetic dominant, you've got to up the acid-ash food level somewhat. You've got to up the acid-ash foods. Gonna have to take my tongue and get it retreaded. But anyway, you have to up them a little bit. That seems to be one of the things that is a problem with them. They need something to neutralize the alkaline reactions in the system. And so this is the reason why that the question came up a little bit before about utilizing rye as a bread. And of course, that would be very good if you could, get a very, very good quality of it, which we have trouble getting up there. But out here in California, you can get just about anything you want, and sometimes two of it. Really. I'll tell you what, I went into a health food store the other day and just saw a whole rack, of stuff that in our area is totally, no-nos. Well, colloidal is a substance that will go into a matrix, and depending on its size, whether it is a large colloidal or a small colloidal, and depending on whether it is water-loving or water-hating, as to whether or not it is lysophilic or lysophobic. Okay, and you can go on and on and on the colloidals. Just remember that protein is an evidence of a colloid, okay? And it forms a matrix, a gel. It bonds together. It stays in solution instead of settling out. Okay, gelatin is an example of a colloid, for instance. And so he's saying that if you can bind the mercury in a colloidal form so that it is bound in a matrix, that's what he was saying. Yeah. Yes, it is. Well, yeah, smog is a colloid because of the fact it doesn't drop out of solution. Okay, so it meets the fact that it forms a homogeneous matrix. Okay. He's saying that there's There's nature of the compound and size of the compound. Well, it's from manufacturing. Okay, let's get off of it and we'll talk about it after class. That'll be a good thing to spend the lunch hour on. Yeah. Now, another thing that these people need is acidophilus, or as my kid sister constantly wants to call it, acetophilus. Okay. She came up to me and she says, "What's a good brand of acetophilus?" I said, "What?" I thought it was something that grew down in South America that she smoked. Now, any of your other factors, such as your yogurts, go in here. And another thing, too, is your kefirs. K-I-E, isn't it? F-E-R? What is it? K-E-F-I-R. Okay. So anyway, your kefirs are also included into here. And one of the things to remember on your yogurt is you have to eat it plain. Because if you don't, the sugar from the fruit that's in there kills the acidophilus and wipes it out before you can get any good out of it. Yeah, you can put fresh fruit in there like berries that have a skin. Okay? Yeah, you can put fresh fruits in there. Huh? Yeah, and then they've just recultured it by adding culture to it after it's been there, yeah. But, does it? There's Mountain High is a brand that's evidently natural. But most yogurt nowadays is pasteurized milk that's recultured. And, but anyway, sugar will wipe it out, but you can plunk fruit in there that has a skin on it. Like you can drop strawberries and blueberries and things of that nature in there, and it won't bother it. Huh? Drops of lemon juice in it? I've never tried it. I don't know. It's a simple procedure to do. It would just be a matter of putting lemon juice in there, mixing it up, and then running a slat on it. So I can do it. Okay, going onward now with this. One of the things that you have to watch on these people, I told you about the B vitamins and the respiratory Bs, but be real certain that when you're getting your B vitamins, that you're getting adequate thiamine, riboflavin, pyridoxine, pantothenic acid. Be sure you're getting adequate in these first groupings. Very frequently, you buy B complex right now, and it only has 6 or 7 Bs in it. But since it has more than one, it's a complex, so they can in fact merchandise it. All right. Now, the next thing that you have to do on this is that you have to watch pituitary. You have to watch the pituitary on these people because fatigue is a frequent factor with them, and if you have a pituitary fatigue, then go ahead and add those additional things in that we discussed day before yesterday, whatever, relative to the pituitary, and then of course keep your eyes open for adrenal problems. And you'll find that you can set up a fairly good diet for these people and tend to break this parasympathetic dominance. Now, I'm parasympathetic dominant, and I can take, if I'm eating halfway right, dulse is the key for me. If I take the rest of my minerals and everything else, dulse is the one factor that throws me back over onto a sympathetic dominance, okay, or to a sympathetic leaning, and it works real good for me. But I know that some people, there's other factors involved, and then I've got a good friend that if he eats B vitamins like candy, that's the factor. Okay? You mean, okay. All right. She made the mention that in traveling and everything like that, she was advised that it would be all right to take comfrey capsules, that, of course, you're getting the allantoin and the various other substances out of comfrey, and was it as effective as a green drink? In way and not in way. One is the amount of chlorophyll in comfrey capsules is pretty minute because the comfrey frequently has a certain degree of root in it, okay, which does not store chlorophyll in the same degree that the leaves do. And secondly, you've got a problem is that one of the factors in green drink is the fact that when you grind these vegetables and get the juices out of them, that you're releasing RNA, DNA factors, minerals, activated enzymes, and things of this nature, along with the chlorophyll, that help the chlorophyll, back up the chlorophyll, act as cofactors of the chlorophyll, and make it a living life energy going into your system. Whereas your comfrey tablets will not supply that need to the same degree, but they're good to take with you because of the fact that comfrey is a good general nephy, good general herb to truck along with you. That'd be beautiful. I've seen bed sores. I've seen them take comfrey and leaves and root half and half and put it over a bed sore as big around as a saucer and started it healing in 3 days, to the point where you could see tissue coming in. It's an amazingly good root, amazingly good thing. Let's look at the sympathetic people now before we run out of time. Can be. Now you're getting into another thing, see, that whenever you get an abnormal, when you get a pathology in there, the point is the body is going to respond to a pathological situation different than it does an abnormal physiological system, so you're in an altogether new set of parameters. Now, in the sympathetic balance, you tend to have these people hyperthyroid. You can check that too with your simple little test. And here these people tend to have, instead of having trouble so much with their mouth, they tend to have trouble with their teeth. They tend to have more than the usual amount of dental caries. I've got a kid that's been taking 2 Mencol a day for a long, long time, and I have been watching him, and he's not been brushing with Crest. We've got him on Pearl Drops toothpaste, and I'm going to see if over a long-term period, if this kid's has a reduction in dental caries, and it will be interesting to find out. He's busy. He takes it pretty regularly, and he doesn't argue about it. It's either that or get his arm broke. Boy, when his mom tells him to do something, there ain't no arguing. She is one mean woman. If I was ever going to fight a war, I'd want her on my side. Okay? Now, these people tend to have temperatures above normal, tend to sweat a little bit more frequently, or easier, tend to sweat easier. You so frequently find these parasympathetic dominant women especially, and they say, you know, I can lay out in the sun for an hour and I just never sweat. You know, and you turn right around and you take the sympathetic dominant woman, and she's, you know, buying her deodorant, you know, in the large 5-gallon cans, and it's really interesting to watch these people as you go through life and study them. It's super, super, super good to watch them. It really is. Now, here's another factor. These people tend to lean toward high blood pressure. And so many people have said to me, you know, I've told them, I said, well, you know, you have a tendency toward high blood pressure. Or you have a, you know, or I won't say anything. And the people have stood over me while I've been reading cards and stuff like that. And I say, well, here's a gal that's 160 pounds. You told her she had a tendency toward high blood pressure. And now here's another gal that weighs 160 pounds, and numbers are about the same. How come you didn't tell it to her? And after you get working for a while, you get to the point where you can almost look at those numbers and look at the degree of eye number stress. And you can almost pick up whether or not they're sympathetic and parasympathetic dominant, or get a good idea of it. And so those of you who are busy working on your cards and everything that have wondered how I'm picking some of that stuff up, why I will say on one person that they have a tendency toward high blood pressure, and on another person with almost identically the same pattern, I will say no. That's how I'm doing it. I'm watching those eye patterns and looking at those numbers and seeing if I can come up with a correlation as to whether or not I feel they are sympathetic dominant or parasympathetic dominant. Tricks to every trade. Okay? Now, these people also tend to be hypergonadal. Naturally, that's the males. All right? And they tend to be more conscious of their maleness. Years ago, they would refer to them as being, what is it, satyrs? What's that word that they use? No, satire is a humorous parody. What is satyr? Is that it? What is it? Satyr? Satyr? Okay. Anyway, years ago, that's what they called them because of the fact that they leer, you know, at women, you know, and things of this nature, supposedly. Run around on little hooved feet. No, that's not. But the women tend to mature earlier. the women tend to mature early. And this, what I mean is that the breast development tends to occur at an earlier age. The onset of menstruation tends to be a little bit earlier. They tend to develop a little bit more maturity in their thoughts relative to sex at an earlier age. And you tend to have more sympathetic dominant people down around the equator, and go down around the equator and take a look at how more rapidly they mature down there. You know, women are actually, I was down in Mexico years ago, and there were girls who were 14 years of age down there who are already established prostitutes. And that's hard to believe when you look at a 14-year-old girl, you know, up here, but I have known of girls 12, 13, and 14 that were already married. Okay, now there is a tendency toward a fast heart with